mile long stretch of levee reach along the Sacramento River right here. And about 3.5 miles of that project includes setback levee. And so if we take a look over here on the land side, much of what you see here is going to be encompassed by about a 400-foot or so setback or offset area. And there'll be breaches in the remnant levee or the current levee that will allow flow during certain periods to flow into and out of this offset area. And then the actual flood protection levee, once the project's complete, will be just west. So we're going to create over 300 acres of habitat area, riparian habitat. There are no recreation features designed into the project, but obviously that lends itself to future recreation opportunities. The project is largely self-mitigating for most of our habitat needs and environmental needs. There is some that we still will need that we won't be able to get on site. And the project's currently in design, and we have it broken up into kind of two phases. There's a transportation and real estate and utility relocation phase. This road that you see here that's along the levee will largely be removed, and that transportation element will be moved inland. It's proposed to be aligned with our current general plan transportation element. It's called our Future Village Parkway, and will be removed from the levee and from the toe of the levee to not interfere with any flood fighting or maintenance activities and keep transportation and access for homeowners away from the levee. The second and the biggest portion of the project will be the actual levee construction. So as was mentioned again in the presentation, we're currently under design. We're going to be submitting an official 408 with the Corps here shortly. We hope to be our plan is to be under construction for the transportation and relocation elements in the spring and summer of next year, and hope to start the levee construction in the fall or the following year in 2016. We're currently finalizing our environmental documents. We anticipate going to our board for project selection and secret certification next month in August.
Is that where the August 19th meeting is?
No, the August 19th meeting that was talked about is specific to the GRR, and that's the first public meeting for the release of those draft documents. So we have two parallel things going on right now. Yep, we have the early implementation project for the Southport 408 as well as the GRR. And the Southport, pretty much in its entire design, is included as an element of the GRR for this reach. So it should be creditable, and immediately upon, and I do mean immediately upon certifying, going out for public release next Friday, I'll be hand carrying our MOU for credit over to the district office to get that executed, so we can be, start accumulating credit for this project for future Corps work.
So, Greg, can I just better understand? So, the total length of new levee is 3.5 miles.
Total length of new setback levee is 3.5 miles. Total length of improvements is 6.
And then how much of the old levee is being, you're basically cutting off a bend, right? So how much of the old levee is being abandoned?
So about 3.5 miles.
Oh, so we're not changing the length that much by just aren't you just connecting across this?
Yeah, I don't have any graphics, but when we were driving through, some of you folks may have noticed the right-hand side of the van, this big wooded area, and there was a lake there. It's called Bees Lake. That's right now that's hydraulically connected to the river, and we, quite frankly, we're unsure what to do with that particular feature. And so our project, when we designed the setback levee, goes around behind Bees Lake and creates two different offset areas, one in the south and one in the north. Each one will have their own breaches that will hydraulically connect themselves to the river and create that habitat area and that water floodplain area. And so we're going around Bees Lake and creating a separate levee feature that will be designed and provide the flood protection. So we don't, both from an environmental standpoint and how do we deal with the hydraulic connectivity, we're just going to go around.
How much private property is required?
In terms of acres, or Paul, what's the total acres of our project? Do you know offhand? This is Paul Dirksen, he's flood protection planner with West Sacramento.
I don't know what it is exactly, but it's over 3.5
300 and a half, right? 3.5, 350, 380, somewhere in there.
A little bit, there's a view.
Is that the number of acres that needs to be
one of us.
acquired? That was the question.
Yeah, that's about, yeah.
Yeah, there's about
Based on
300.
65% design.
There's about 300 acres alone in the offset areas, and the remaining 50 or so acres, I'm not really sure what the number is, but that's for the levee alignment and the
seepage
transportation
berm,
element, seepage
The
berm, all
O&M
that.
corridor.
Yeah.
Are all the environmental enhancements mitigation, or are any of them actually above and beyond mitigation?
There's much that's above and beyond what's required for the project in terms of mitigation.
And who will end up responsible for that excess mitigation and what is done with it?
That still remains to be determined.
In case somebody
But a lot
might
of
need
it-
it for other projects.
That's right. Well,
Not saying.
and well, we also anticipate, being able to use it for our future projects as well. So this, as the mayor had pointed out, this reach will roughly, between the previous work that we've done, core work that's been completed, and once this is complete, will roughly be about half of the levee system, improvement, about half the levee system for right around the city. That does not include the 17 or so miles that the Corps was talking about down the ship channel.
What's your rough cost estimate for this EIP?
A rough cost estimate for the EIP at this point, 65% cost opinion, qualify that, is about $170 million. 170, yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
170 million. This is going to be a pretty brief stop because we don't have a lot of project elements to talk about, but I think what this area, we can see from this area, one, this is the southern portion of the city limits, the southern boundary. And this levee over here where the horses are, that's the South Cross levee. So that spans the western edge to the eastern edge at the very southern city limits. And as Paul mentioned earlier, the Southport project will terminate at the eastern end of the South Cross levee. What's unique about this levee, it's a dry levee. There's no water on either side of it. And hopefully there never will be. But this levee is being included as part of the GRR, even though it's not actually part of the federally recognized levees. So as it stands right now, the Corps considers about 17 miles this way and about 17 miles along the Sacramento River as part of the Sacramento Basin, the study area. So getting this South Cross levee into our study and getting it accepted as part of into the PL 8499 system will truncate that 17 miles or a total of 34 miles of levees if you count both sides. So this is a very unique feature for us and helps to sort of limit the study area and limit potential damages and also limit how much work would need to be done as part of the West Sacramento project. Right. Also from here, we're basically standing on the Ship Channel East levee. It's really large. We're standing on basically a lot of the spoils that were created when the ship channel was built, which is right on the other side of this berm here. When a ship's coming down the levee, it sometimes will be, depending on the water level, can be 2 to 4 stories above this levee height. So it's pretty interesting to watch a ship come down the barge canal, down the ship channel. Then on the other side of that channel is the is the Yolo bypass. So the Yolo bypass and the levees north of the city limits are included as part of the GRR. The Ship Channel East levee is also included as part of the GRR. And the South Cross levee is also included as part of the GRR. We don't have any early projects in the pipeline at this point. So these are likely to be projects that will be done at a later date in partnership with the Corps. Or in advance of the Corps should circumstances present themselves.
So is the theory of the Corps that the navigation levee could fail, causing water to travel up the ship channel and into Sacramento through
West
the port?
Sacramento. Exactly right. Yeah. So that's why we have the 17 miles.
And there's also a large head differential between the water in the Yolo bypass, being like a 200-year head, compared to what would be in the deep water shipping channel.
Yeah, another location.
Wow,
Right.
I mean, if you put some water into the ship channel, it might balance that out?
Oh my gosh, you're so funny.
That's kind of a leading question there, Tim.
Tim, stay on our side of the river. Tim, come on back over here.
So I do in wet winter. It's a very interesting phenomenon. What Tim's sort of talking about. If you're on the northern end of this, where you can, or really anywhere along the line, where you can see the water level in the bypass and the water level in the ship channel, there's a significant difference, and it's kind of mind-boggling. It's very interesting to take a look at. Any questions about where we are or anything we've discussed so far? I think as far as the schedule goes, we're right on time for getting back over to our city hall for a quick restroom break, and then heading over to the other side of the river where Tim can do a lot more talking about about those features. So any last questions or comments? All right, then let's hit the road. We're going to be taking Jefferson Boulevard straight up to West Capitol and back to City Hall.
We have several of them that we've been doing over the past, since '97. They're listed on the map that I passed out. The ones that we have in orange are the active sites that we're doing this year. And they're comprised of several jet grout sites and several slurry wall sites. The slurry walls along the American River were put in under contract in the late 90s and early 80s, leaving areas under bridges and around utilities. And that's what we're working to finish up with what we're contracting out and getting constructed this year and possibly early into next year. This site, we're putting a jet grout wall underneath the bridge, tying into the slurry wall that's already been placed on both sides. What you're seeing over here to the left is the pit for the material that comes up when we're placing the jet grout columns. It has to dry before we move it off the site. And the intent is to have an impermeable barrier basically within the levee that's down 40, 50 feet, all the way to the top of the levee, so you don't have seepage coming through. Mike, give a spiel on what jet grout is.
So I'm Mike Credit. I'm the geotechnical lead for American River. This site, Closing the Gap, like Dave said, is a jet grout project. During alternative selection, we deemed that a positive cutoff was the best alternative. Various methods for doing that. The best for this site was jet grout, where we use a drill rig to drill down, like Dave said, to about 50 or 60 feet. And then you're inserting a high pressure water, grout, and air mixture, mixing soils, and that forms a column of a cement, grout, water, and soil mixture that becomes impermeable to seepage. Through inserting several of those columns, we create a continuous wall. Like Dave said, in order to cross the bridge site, we have to go down the levee slope, across underneath the bridge, and then back up the other side. So far what we've done is located the existing cutoff wall, the SCB cutoff wall that was built in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we're installing casings at this point to initiate our jet grout work in the next few weeks. That's basically it.
Just so you guys understand, with the slurry walls, we're excavating a trench and filling it with either bentonite or bentonite cement mixture to build a wall that's impermeable. Where we can't get the equipment under bridges like this, and this is one of the most confined we've got, we'll only be able to drill 3 feet at a time, so it takes a long time to get them in. It's building 6-foot diameter columns that go down 50, 60 feet. And we overlap them and keep going like a daisy chain, so you end up with a continuous wall. John, did you have anything?
I covered it pretty well. We have this site, we have R3A at Business 80 is a jet grout site. We have 2 jet grout sites in East Street Bridge on the north and south banks, and we'll be our jet grout projects this year.
So I don't know if you guys heard John, but for the benefit, especially of the board members, this is going to be your typical construction site for these remaining sites. If you look on your map, you'll see an R7 and L7. We're downstream. We're going to be heading to the Guy West Bridge, and you'll be able to see the 8th Street Bridge from the Guy West Bridge. They'll use the same type of construction methods at the downstream sites. What I want to call your attention to is that this site, you're able to stage pretty much on the outside of the parkway. The next jobs, the R7, L7 sites, they'll be staging inside the parkway, and so you can see these types of these pits will be inside the parkway. Just something for you to have a mental picture of, because you may hear about it in the coming months if something comes along. So this is just something visually for you to understand. We can cover it more at the Guy West Bridge site as well, but just want to kind of make sure you take a look at how this is done.
Are we at L10?
Yes.
And you can see, usually with these jet grout, we're looking at a 60-foot long drill that drills a hole, and then another apparatus starts placing and spinning under pressure the cementitious material to make a column. And we have to work under them, and that's why these areas were left till the very end. In order to keep on track to get to Guy West, do we have any questions?
So once you start grouting operations, how long will it take before you're done grouting?
It depends on how many columns you've got every project. At this site, we're finishing up in October. John? This site, we're looking to finish with the column placement by October.
So it's for a period of months.
Oh, yes.
Yes, takes several months.
As they drill down, they have to put all of the tubing and piping for cement to go down and cuttings to come back up are in the pipe. And here you've got 3-foot segments they have to line up and lock, and we're putting 3 feet, drilling 3 feet, putting another one, and the same coming out. So it's a very long process. Where it normally take a day to do one, it's going to take 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
That's what I was just saying. Okay.
Because of the confined space we're in, we can't use the long drill. So we're looking at cutting back in production time, taking days instead of 1 day per column. So when you're putting in 60 columns, you're going from taking 2 months to 2 or more months, from 4 or more months.
We can have your attention. We'll get going on at this site here.
Watch the bike.
So I've passed out some of these. I have a few more if you don't have a copy, or maybe we can share. We just wanted to point out the bank protection site. So basically where these photos were taken that were from the slide presentation, it's basically looking downstream here. And then on the other side of these photos, we have an example of the rock trench work that was completed basically right across this river. I'm not sure we'll have time to walk over there.
No, but there is, just for as we walk back out on the levee slope over here on downstream of the bridge, there is rock buried in the levee slope to prevent high bank erosion, and you never know it's there. So if you look at this section here, this is kind of similar to what is being proposed for the rest of the levee work along the Sacramento River. You will have, there's a story wall in the levee, goes down about 80 feet. There is some bank face erosion that is buried, and then you've seen erosion on, at the toe, protecting the bank, and that limited bench with its habitat values from eroding further by the type of work that was done in the mid-90s. You can see this has actually grown out fairly well. It provides the necessary habitat. It's a nice visual for the folks that enjoy the river.
And this is page 15 for everybody.
This also exists upstream of you as well. You can see how thick the vegetation is there. It stops before it gets to the city's intake plant. But one of the reasons why this is so important, Sarah showed it in her slide, that the velocities here for the design flow is about 12 feet per second. Very erosive in a bend. Immediately across from the treatment plant, I think in 1986 you probably lost a couple of 100 feet of bench in the parkway. Once it starts to erode, it can erode very quickly because it's, as you saw in that one slide, it's old hydraulic mining debris. So the GRR that we're looking at is proposing it armoring the bank as we go upstream and as we go downstream from this location, because this is the tightest spot of the river system, highest velocities, most erosive forces. This is also a very busy parkway. You can see we've had a few bicyclists, but this is a Saturday, we'd have a lot. And they enjoy this bench. The bike trail sits on the bench and it provides habitat and recreational enjoyment. When you look at this plan, the river's going to be here longer than we are. How do we go about protecting this parkway rather than allowing the bench or to erode out to the levee section? So this is one of the challenges that we have in this GRR, is how do we go about protecting this parkway with its habitat values and allow the recreation to be completed here, you know, to work while there's all this interest in the parkway. I don't know how many users it has a year, but 8 million? You know, I feel sorry for Todd when he has to deal with all the inquiries that exist here. But if you remember the slide here, the GRR is not just erosion work on the American River. There's slurry wall work in the pocket, and there's slurry wall work along the Arcade Creek NEMDEC system. Similar to West Sac, SAFCA is looking at doing a 408 application and doing some of the work ahead of the Corps. If you recall, back in August of 2013, the Corps of Engineers rescinded their levee certification, or withdrew it, and we want to get back into the good graces of FEMA by having a certified levee system. So SAFCA, with help from the state we hope, will do work in the pocket area and in Arcade Creek to provide us 100-year level of protection, 200-year level of protection to meet SB 5 criteria, and then over the long term we're going to address encroachments and potential some veg issues to get back into the good graces of the PL 8499 program. As we know that West Sac is in the same boat, we might be able to do some of this work on our own to get into that level while the Corps can be working in West Sacramento. The Corps, the reason why we don't have to do work on the American River levees is the Corps has already done that. As you saw what was happening at the L10 site, we've got about 23 to 24 miles of slurry wall already in this levee system. We've already addressed some erosion sites, but we can certify without any additional rock being placed, but we have a 200-year plan, and we also want to get beyond that, and that rock work will help us get beyond that type of level of protection. So I don't know, Sarah, if you've got, or David, but...
On the other side of the river, one of the things we talked about was the launchable rock, which is the graphic that you've got on page 13. On page 14, it shows the site just to the right of us on this stretch of levee, where a trench was excavated out at the base of the levee, rock placed, so if we do get enough erosion, the rocks will launch and protect the levee. So we're looking at a full range of opportunities along the American River. We'll get into more detail when we actually get to the PED phase, the design phase.
I'd like to say a little something about that, because I know the board got a presentation several weeks ago from Ron Stork reflecting Ron's concerns about the way the GRR is actually unfolding, that it's at a very high level, up to 10 miles of armoring in the American River Parkway, details to be worked out later. Now that's not typically the way we have done things in the past, and Ron is registering his concern about not having a more detailed description of what we are doing before we basically are going to Congress and getting authority for this level of work. And I mean, one of the reasons we were able to do this is because we were able to create a table around which the parkway interests, the resource agencies, the engineers, and others were able to have a back and forth collaborative discussion, number one, about why you have to have armoring in the parkway, because it's a losing system. It's not like it's a meandering river and material is taken from one side and deposited on the other side. It just disappears and it doesn't come back. And for that reason, there is support among the recreationists and the environmentalists and the resource agencies for well-designed and well-conceived bank protection. And we are very much interested in reviving the Lower American River Task Force Forum that we used to develop the machinery, essentially, the social infrastructure to support a sustained long-term presence of the engineers in the parkway. And that's not going to be an easy undertaking. So one of the things we are working with DWR and suggesting to the Corps is the next phase of Sac Bank has about 80,000 linear feet in it. Okay, that would fit very nicely in the American River Parkway and is a place where we could get started in recreating that infrastructure and reestablishing the acceptance of people of what we're doing in here, perhaps in advance of whenever the authorization for the GRR may occur. So we're very interested in working with DWR, with the board, and with the Corps on getting started with the work that needs to be done here sooner rather than later, and doing it in the way that we successfully did it in the 1990s, which is in collaboration with the resource agencies, with the Parkway Interests and others, with a real exchange over where it's needed, how it's going to be designed, and how it's going to be constructed. So I just wanted to make that point, that SAFCA at least is going to be a strong advocate for getting started sooner and for recreating what we thought was a very successful approach, 10 or 15 years ago.
And
One more point I was hoping.
This is a very good example of Sac Bank type fix that's very successful in how we've replaced the vegetation, as that's shown on 15. For the 2001, that's what it looked about like back then, and you can see there's a lot of area for habitat in the region.
One additional point I'd like to make. Excuse me.
Why'd you replace it?
We had to put the armoring in. You got one of the slides down here.
No, I know that, but why'd you put it back?
For fish habitat and for environmental purposes.
And that's part of our process.
In 2001, yes.
That's part of our process with any project that we undertake. Public involvement. We don't break ground until we've got. We have to get all of the permits and the CEQA clearance. We are attending the American River Task Force board meetings, and we've made it clear to them, including Ron, and committed to having them involved in the process as we move forward. And anything we can do to advance getting erosion protection in is certainly a benefit.
Yeah, well, so when you work along a waterway, there's certain habitat conditions, and so how do you do it in an effective way? And this is a great way where it's self-mitigating. You didn't have to go acquire new lands or other lands.
But it took 4 years before you saw some plantings come back in any earnest. And we're going to have to do this in a way that we only take out a certain length of it at any time. And we've got a shaded riverine habitat where we've got enough location for the birds and the fisheries that need shaded.
One additional point I wanted to point out for this particular spot was you can see upstream is the Fairburn potable water drinking plant, one of only 2 plants for Sacramento, and that was a special site that we had to use for construction. For one of the window sites, 28 window sites. This of course is, and downstream is the H Street Bridge, where we will be talking to the board in the near future about some of the details we have coming up with that special considerations going on with that site downstream.
And we did have a question on our van about the cutoff wall at the ends of this location. A window was left on both sides, and in the past few years we have gone through and used the slurry wall to actually work a tie-in between the upstream and downstream.
Sarah, in your presentation you highlighted 2 strategies, and what is your decision criteria as to which strategy to follow?
We have several different decision criteria that we be using, specifically environmental concerns at site-specific locations. If there's really critical habitat right up against the water and there's room to work behind that closer to the levee, we would do more of the rock, launchable rock trench there. If it's a bank basically that's really essential, or one that we could preserve from eroding, we would really prefer to do this sort of method that would prevent the berm from eroding further. And we'd also take into account recreational concerns at that specific site where the bike path is going through. So, in a nutshell.
I think it goes back to what Tim was talking about, the more collaborative. Rather than having a decision tree without input from the parkway users, is probably a way for you to delay a project. I think if you have a more collaborative approach where the parkway users or interests and the engineering can come together and say, this is how we make these decisions, I think that's how you'll get your success, is the implementation where everybody is in agreement. That's the way we go.
And the we that Sarah is talking about are PDTs. They are comprised of staff from SAFCA and DWR, and we are relying on them as well as the efforts that we take for the public outreach to make sure that we're putting in a fix that works for the majority.
Okay. Any other questions? And just one last thing we had talked about, for those of you that aren't familiar with Sacramento, we talked about where the Corps is going to work next on the H Street Bridge. That's the H Street Bridge right there. So the jet grout operation you saw at what we call L10 or Howe Avenue will be occurring on both sides of that bridge.
And we're looking for that effort to get started with placing test columns the end of July. Do we have any questions?
Is any of that construction going to impact the recreational users?
We have bypasses for the bike paths. There's little that we do that doesn't have some impact, but we always try to mitigate. We always do mitigate and find alternate routes that they can take.
Yeah, I appreciate that.